future of software development, how technology is going to change the way we develop software. And we're also looking at how developers and DevOps professionals can and should be future-proofing their careers, and taking a deep dive into what kind of skills they're going to need for the future. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think there's a lot to unpack. First of all, I think DevOps is still very early. Although there's a lot of people familiar with it, there's a lot of teams still working with the developers separate from the operations people. So that's a mega trend that will keep continuing, where something isn't finished until you've deployed it to your users and are getting feedback. GitLab is on the forefront of that, and it's not just that you start like automated deployment, but also technologies like progressive delivery, where you use feature flags and other types of deployment to kind of reduce the risk are super important in that. Another development is like it keeps getting more complex, and it keeps being great if you have an overview of the entire field. It used to be front end and back end, but it's more complex now. Even just developing an app with the Jamstack or JavaScript is getting more complex, and then not even talks about like all the operational things from Kubernetes to manage it, to kind of CDNs that can use WASM runtimes to quickly respond to the user. The third trend is microservices. I think microservices is probably a bit overstated, but it's clear that there's going to be more services in our future, and that the interaction between services is important. If you're dealing with distributed systems, things get tougher, and technologies like tracing will be important to know about to troubleshoot these sets of services. Another trend is kind of self-healing. We're going from continuous deployment, where you just tell the computer what to update, to something like Terraform, where you kind of have a definition and you update every now and then, to things like Kubernetes CRDs, custom resource definitions, where the system just knows the state it should be in. And viewed through a different lens, you see the same thing with technologies like Vault. Instead of having secrets in a company or in systems that kind of last for years or for months, you have dynamic secrets that get continually refreshed, kind of self-healing for secrets. Another development is the AI integration. Right now,
good. My favorite subject.
Your favorite subject, great.
Oh, I love it. Yes. Okay.
I think Tesla has a great video about their self-driving system. It used to be all code, all rules, and then they had some models they made, and over time the models took over more and more of the code base. And I think that's what we're going to see. And it depends very much on your application, but I think every set of software in the future is going to be a combination. Every significant set of software in the future is going to be a combination of some procedural code and some models. And what we will see is that the models will eat more and more of the code over time. Maybe not a great example, but I could, for example, the Linux scheduling. Whole set of really good rules, and you can choose many of them. I think it's going to be eaten by a model over time. But it's going to happen gradually. I think another big area is data ops. As we have more machine learning and AI, we need better control of our data lineage, of reproducibility, of, hey, what data do I use for improving the model? What do I use for verifying that the model is correct? So dealing with all of that data, with all of those models that are trained, and training the models is going to become much more important. So data, ML, AI workflows are going to be really interesting, and technologies like Kubeflow are on the forefront of that. Second to last, I want to touch on privacy. Privacy is getting more important. You see now technologies where you can kind of aggregate results without knowing specifics about people. I think that's interesting. You have things like GDPR requests that kind of require you to go back and like delete people from backups and things like that, requiring you to have like encryption keys for people you can throw away in order to not store their data anymore. And then the last but certainly not least, security. I think the detection response loop is going to get tighter. If you have a dependency that has a known vulnerability, now it takes weeks for people to update, to be quicker. I think now if we have an operating system vulnerability, many Docker images don't get updated at all. I think that's unacceptable, and I think that's going to change. And I also think that white hat hacking is going to get more prevalent. Bug bounty programs where people can report vulnerabilities, I think it's going to develop to be an important pillar of securing companies.
So let me ask you from an employer's perspective, can I dive into just a little bit of how your take on how employers can work with developers and their DevOps teams to make sure that they're getting these skills? Like, how do I, if I'm a developer, how am I getting there with my employer, or how should I be getting there with my employer, getting these skills? Am I doing this on my own, or is this a partnership with my employer?
Yeah, ideally it's a partnership. My own experience has been that many people take a huge responsibility for their own education. So I think it's just important to have an interest, and I think people should be allowed to kind of experiment with these new technologies as long as they don't feel the inclination to defend their time spent on it by bringing it into the code base.
Okay. Makes sense. Let's go back to my favorite subject, AI and ML. When do you think, if you put your prognosticator hat on, that's going to be like a daily part of writing code?
Well, the future's already here. It's just unevenly distributed. So for some people, it's already daily part, and for some people, it's going to be 30 years from now before it's part of it. So if you're building a self-driving car, it's part of it. If you're well, it's hard to think of an area where it isn't applicable eventually, but okay. It's going to happen over time, and it's not a distinct. I think it's going to become less and less of a distinct activity. I think it's going to be more and more integrated. Just like you call out to a library, you can call out to a model.
Okay, that's great. Okay. Anything else you want to add? Because I think that does it for me, and I can give you some of your time back. I appreciate your chiming in. It's great.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. My pleasure, and I don't have anything else.
Okay, I'll of course run this